Hi, are you under contract with a new home and your home inspector asks you if you want to check for mold? Have you always wondered whether you should check the mold levels in your current house? Today we're going to cover three things. One, what is mold? Two, how do you check mold types and levels? And three, what do you do if the mold level is too high? Right now. While I've been a realtor in the Salt Lake area since 2005, I'm definitely not a qualified mold inspector. However, many of my buyers have had mold tests done during their due diligence period, so I'm somewhat experienced in the process of mold testing and remediation. Recently, I spoke with the good folks at Pillar to Post Home Inspections to get their insight on what I should show you today, and they have kindly provided me with some great information to share. So what is mold? We all know what mold looks like, right? There are about 70,000 species that have been identified and an estimated 100,000 more that have yet to be identified. Most of these, by the way, are black in color. Fungi are important sources of antibiotics, and they are used in the food industry, beer, wine, cheese, fruit juices, and industrial processes. Different molds grow on different materials. Minute spores are carried by air. We breathe them and they're deposited everywhere. The vast majority are not harmful. If they exist in the outside area, they also exist in the inside air. And if there's a significant difference in quantity or type between the two, further investigation is needed. Health experts indicate that depending upon the type of mold present in the home, the amount and degree of exposure, and the health condition of the occupant, the health effects of mold can range from being insignificant to causing allergic reactions and illness. Stachybotrys. This is the scary one that people usually mean when they're talking about black mold, even though there are thousands of different species of mold that are black in color. But the mold can only really be identified by laboratory tests. Certain molds are toxigenic, meaning that they can produce toxins, specifically mycotoxins. The hazards presented by molds that may produce mycotoxins should be considered the same as other common molds which can grow in your house. Not all fungi produce mycotoxins, and even those that do will not do so under all surface or environmental conditions. Likely places for mold growth: areas that show signs of water damage, even if the damage is old, dark, moist places, bathrooms and basements, unventilated places, and attics. So how do you control mold growth? You need to dehumidify spaces with a little air circulation. You need to avoid carpets on slab or below grade in basements. Clean drains, sump pumps, and avoid standing water. Check regularly for signs of leaks, discoloration, deterioration, etc. And keep stored materials away from the walls. You need to ensure that dryers do have a vent to the outside. And you need to turn on the fan when showering or bathing and leave it on for about a half hour afterwards. Make sure all the outdoor water, like sprinklers, are directed away from the home. And make sure that the landscaping is sloped away from your house. Also make sure that the rain gutters are extended out and away from the house. Testing. So mold testing is done in a variety of ways depending upon the information needed. Generally, air sampling is best for determining if there's a mold problem in the entire home. Air sampling identifies the presence, types, and quantities of airborne mold spores in the area where it was collected. And it is done by pulling a metered amount of air through the spore trap, which will collect any particulate within the air, including microscopic mold spores. All indoor samples are compared then to an outdoor control as a baseline. Determine if the indoor conditions are excessive or elevated compared to the outside. Cost. So the typical cost of a mold test from a home inspector is about $375, and most of that expense is due to the lab. The lab report takes about 4 to 5 days to return from the lab, and the report will show the types of mold in the home and the percentage and the strength. So let's talk about remediation. First, you need to fix the source. Otherwise, you're only taking care of the symptoms and it's going to happen again. Don't paint over the mold, clean or remove it. Bleach is not the end-all solution for cleanup. Antifungals are more widely suggested. The CDC allows you to clean up areas yourself if they're less than 3 square meters. The CDC website also has a list of suggested products and steps for doing it on your own. So here's a good example. In my home, I decided to build a small office and a YouTube studio when my youngest son moved out. In the main closet, we moved a shelf out that has some packaging on top, and we saw about a 12 by 6 inch area of mold in the ceiling. I called a mold remediation company, and they cut out the ceiling drywall about 12 inches around the mold. They then decontaminated the area with chemicals. After the area dried, they put plastic sheets around the area and brought in a large vacuum to remove any traces of mold and exhaust it out the window. The process took a couple of days. While they were up there, they also checked to see the source of the drip. It was coming from a refrigerator right above us. Once we went on vacation, it dripped, from the water where you fill up the water. And so they had to check on the source to make sure it wouldn't happen again. After that, we've installed new ceiling drywall and repainted the closet. So here's the process. Typically, when you're buying a home, the home inspector will have additional services beyond the normal home inspections. These are often radon, meth, and mold inspections. During your due diligence period, you should always have your home inspected by a professional home inspector. If you're having a mold test done, your inspector will do 3 tests, one outside and then 2 areas inside the house. Be sure to let your realtor know that you plan to have a mold test so that he can tell the listing agent. Also, make sure to have your testing done early in your due diligence period so that you can get the results in time to negotiate any inspection repairs or mold remediation before your due diligence deadline. Now, there's no standard remediation requirement based upon lab results. It really depends on the mold type and the concentration. As a buyer, you can cancel for due diligence. You can negotiate with the seller to have part or all remediation costs paid by the seller, or you may decide to continue the purchase and handle the remediation later. Your realtor should be able to work with the listing agent to figure out the best way to handle any remediation. For those of you who have an existing home and want mold tests, you can get them done by most home inspection companies. Feel free to contact me and I can give you a list of quality home inspectors that I've used in the past. So be sure to watch my video on getting a home inspection and radon testing. Thanks, and please contact me with any questions. See ya.